It was the most humiliating moment of my life. Standing there in front of the people I once considered family, I felt the wet sting of my husband's spit on my cheek. I couldn't believe it. John had just spit in my face in front of his mother and sister. And the worst part? They laughed. I should have seen it coming, I suppose. All the years of putting up with his arrogance, his disregard for me, and yet here I was, standing there in shock, trying to process what had just happened. The venom in his eyes, the look of superiority from his family, it all made sense now. It wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, it was who they were. And in that moment I knew that my marriage, my life as I knew it, was over. Before I could even react, his mother chuckled, the sound as hollow as ever. "Oh, John, she never learns, does she?" she said, glancing at his sister, who shared the same smug, condescending smile. The spit on my cheek burned, but it wasn't the physical sting that hurt most. It was the complete disregard for me as a person, the way they all saw me, as an object, as someone to be controlled. But as I stood there, my heart racing, I realized something. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I wasn't going to stand there and take it. I walked away without a second thought. No more explanations, no more begging for respect. I walked out of that house for the last time. If you're ready to hear the full story of how I found the strength to walk away and take back control of my life, make sure you subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I might give you a shout out in my next video. I'm Margaret and I'm in my 60s. I've spent the last 40 years of my life as a wife, a mother, and yes, a grandmother. I thought I had everything figured out. A loving husband, a beautiful home, children who respected me. Or so I thought. But it turns out that everything I thought I knew was a lie, and it took a slap in the face, literally, to wake me up. For years I had sacrificed for my family. I worked tirelessly, never asking for much in return. And for those years I thought John loved me. Thought he cared. But as I stood there in front of him, his mother, and his sister, I realized the truth. I had been invisible to him for far too long. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I fight back then? Why didn't I leave? The truth is, I didn't think I had the strength. For so long I believed that leaving would mean I lost everything. But what I didn't realize until that moment was that staying was the thing that was truly going to destroy me. As I walked out of that house, I didn't know where I was going. I had no plan, no idea what I was going to do next. All I knew was that I had to get out. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore, couldn't stand the thought of staying one more minute in a place where I had been disrespected by the very people I had cared for. I walked to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. As I drove away, my mind kept racing. Was I making the right choice? Could I really walk away from everything I had known? The life I had built? But something inside me shifted. The decision had been made the moment he spit in my face. I had been living for everyone else, doing everything for them, and it was time for me to do something for myself. I didn't know how, but I was going to rebuild my life. I was going to find my own power again, my own voice. It wasn't going to be easy, but I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let John, his mother, or his sister break me. As I made my way to my daughter's house, the phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled over to the side of the road, trying to calm my breathing. My hands were still trembling, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me. I took a deep breath and looked at the screen. It was a text from John. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You can't just walk away from your life. I'll make sure you never get what you want." I stared at the words, my heart sinking. What did he mean? What had he done? I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, but I didn't care where I was going. The roads blurred together, each mile that passed taking me farther from the house, farther from the man I had called my husband for over 30 years. But the weight in my chest wasn't lifting. In fact, it was growing heavier. Why does it hurt so much? I asked myself. Why do I feel like I'm losing more than just my marriage? I turned the wheel, my knuckles white as I tried to focus. The road stretched before me, but the direction didn't matter. The decision had been made. Walk away, that was the only thing I knew for sure. It wasn't that I hadn't considered leaving before. Over the years there had been moments, too many moments, where I thought about packing my things, walking out the door and leaving everything behind. But every time I started to gather the courage, there was something that held me back. My children. The house. The memories. A lifetime together, or so I had believed. But that was before I realized that the life I'd built was nothing but a facade. A facade that crumbled with a single act of disrespect. He spit in my face. And they laughed. That was the moment everything changed. I parked the car in front of my daughter's house and sat there for a moment, staring at the empty driveway. The house seemed so still, like it was waiting for me to make my next move. I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car and walking toward the door. I didn't know what I was expecting when I knocked, but I needed someone. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy for walking away. My daughter opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I stepped inside, avoiding her gaze. I didn't want to show her how broken I felt. I didn't want her to see that I was crumbling. It's over, honey," I said, my voice cracking as I finally let the tears fall. I walked away. I had to. I couldn't stay there anymore. She didn't ask questions, just wrapped her arms around me, and for a moment I allowed myself to break. To let go of the strength I had been holding on to for so long. We sat in the living room, me in a chair and her on the couch across from me, the silence stretching between us. The weight of everything that had happened was too much to process in a single conversation, but I had to start somewhere. I had to speak the words aloud. "I don't know what happened," I whispered, wiping my tears. "I thought John loved me. I thought we had something real. But he humiliated me right in front of his mother and sister. And then they laughed. I can't go back to that." My daughter sat up straighter, her expression one of disbelief. "What did he say? What happened?" I recounted the scene, how I had stood there in shock, the spit still fresh on my skin, the laughter of his family ringing in my ears. I told her how, for the first time, I realized that my place in his life had never really been what I thought. I had always been the afterthought, the one to be dismissed and controlled, not the equal partner I had believed I was. When I finished, my daughter was silent for a long moment. Then she leaned forward, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "Mom, you don't deserve that. No one does. But I want you to know something. This is his loss. Not yours. He's the one who ruined everything." Her words were the first comfort I had received in days, and for the first time I felt a spark of something. Hope, maybe. It was like a flicker of light in the darkness, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. That I didn't have to shoulder this burden by myself. "I don't know what's next," I said softly. "I don't even know if I'm making the right choice. But I can't keep pretending I'm okay. I can't keep putting up with this." She nodded, her expression softening. "Whatever you choose, I'm here for you. We'll figure it out. You don't have to go through this alone." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the guest room of my daughter's house, the weight of the decision I'd made pressing down on me. The bed felt too big, too empty. The silence was deafening. My mind was racing with questions I didn't know how to answer. What did I do now? Where did I go from here? I couldn't go back to that house. I couldn't go back to the life I'd built with John, not when it had all been a lie. I found myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was being too hasty. Maybe I should have tried harder. Maybe I should have tried to fix things. But then I remembered the look on his face, the sneer that twisted his lips as he spat on me. And I remembered the way his mother and sister had laughed. The way they had supported him as if it was nothing. I couldn't go back. I couldn't be that woman anymore. I had walked away without a plan, but I wasn't going to walk away from this fight. Not anymore. The next morning I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. I hesitated for a moment before answering, my stomach churning. I didn't recognize the number. "Hello," I said, my voice shaky. "Margaret," a familiar voice said. It was John. I froze. "I need to see you," he continued, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of something darker. "We need to talk about this. You don't understand what you're dealing with. There are things you don't know, things I need to explain." I felt my pulse quicken. "Explain? Explain what, John? The way you humiliated me? Or the way you let your family treat me like dirt? What is there left to explain?" He paused, the silence stretching between us. Then he spoke again, his voice lower now. "It's bigger than that. You've made a mistake. And if you don't listen to me, things are going to get worse for you." I could feel my stomach churn. What was he threatening? What did he mean? "I'm done with you, John," I said, trying to steady my voice. "You've crossed a line and I'm not going back. Not now. Not ever." But the line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, my hand trembling. I had walked away without looking back, but now I knew this wasn't over. John wasn't going to let me go that easily. The silence of the house was unbearable. It felt like I had stepped into a world where I no longer belonged, where the echoes of everything I had worked so hard to build rang hollow. My thoughts spiraled as I walked around the guest room, my mind racing, trying to grasp everything that had happened. One moment I had been living my life, convinced of its stability, and in the next I was left standing outside the life I had built, with no idea what I was supposed to do next. The phone call from John had left a knot in my stomach. His words had been laced with that same arrogance, that same sense of entitlement he'd always had. But this time it was different. He wasn't just telling me I'd made a mistake. He was threatening me, hinting at something much bigger than I could imagine. And I didn't know how much longer I could keep running away from it. I sat down on the edge of the bed, running my fingers through my hair as I tried to breathe. What did he mean when he said, "Things are going to get worse for you"? The more I thought about it, the more unsettled I became. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This wasn't just about the marriage falling apart. No, this was about something much darker. Something I couldn't even fully comprehend yet. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room. I needed answers. I needed to know what John had been hiding from me, from all of us. I had spent years in the dark, trusting him, loving him, sacrificing everything for the family. And for what? To be left standing here, humiliated, betrayed, and alone? I reached for my phone again, this time dialing my lawyer's number. I needed someone who could help me make sense of everything that was happening. I needed someone who could help me make sure I wasn't just being led down a path of no return. The phone rang a few times before someone picked up. "Margaret." It was David, the lawyer I'd been working with on the estate. His voice was familiar, a comforting presence in a time of confusion. "What's going on?" "I'm glad you called." "David, I don't know what to do," I said, my voice shaking as the words rushed out. "John called me today. He's threatening me. He says I've made a mistake, that things are going to get worse if I don't listen to him." "Take a deep breath," David said calmly. "What exactly did he say to you?" Rachel nodded, her eyes cast downward as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. "Yes, I knew what was going on. I knew about the business dealings. I knew about the offshore accounts. John wanted me to take over everything. He wanted me to manage the estate after his death, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to be part of the mess he'd made." Her confession hit me like a slap across the face. The betrayal had already been so deep, so ingrained, but hearing it from Rachel, my daughter-in-law, the woman I had trusted as family, felt like a betrayal of the highest order. I stood up from my chair, pacing in front of her. "You knew everything and you let it happen? You sat back, played the part of the perfect daughter-in-law, and you let him destroy everything? For what? Money. Power. Rachel shook her head quickly, her eyes welling with tears. No, it wasn't like that. At first, I didn't know how deep it went. I thought it was just business stuff. I thought John was doing it for us, for the family. But then when I found out everything, when I realized what he was really doing, I felt trapped. I didn't know how to get out of it. The more she spoke, the more I felt my anger rise. How could she stand there and tell me this now after everything I had gone through? After I had spent years supporting John, putting up with his coldness and distance, only for it to turn out that Rachel had known all along, played along with it all and kept quiet? You played along, Rachel. You let me think you were one of us, I spat, my voice shaking with fury. You used me. You used my love for you, for this family, to cover up John's lies. And now you come here with some half-hearted apology as if that changes anything. She flinched at my words, but there was no defensiveness in her, no anger. Only sorrow. I'm sorry, Margaret. I should have told you the truth. But I was scared. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to tell you what had happened. My anger flared, but there was something in her voice, something that made me hesitate. It was genuine fear, genuine regret. Maybe there was more to this than I realized. Maybe Rachel had been trapped too, just like I had been. But that didn't excuse her actions. Scared. I echoed, my voice trembling. You were scared, so you kept lying to me? You let me be the fool? You let John use me as a pawn in this sick game. Her eyes welled with tears and she stood up, walking toward me. I never wanted this for you, Margaret. I never wanted to hurt you. But John, he was obsessed. And I was too weak to stop him. But now I'm done. I want out of this. I want to make things right. I stared at her for a long time, trying to make sense of her words, trying to understand if I could ever believe her again. The pain was too fresh, the betrayal too raw. Could I forgive her? Could I forgive myself for trusting her? And then something else occurred to me. If Rachel was telling the truth, if she really did want to get out of this mess, then maybe we could find a way to take down John's empire together. Maybe we could expose the lies, the deceit, and put an end to it once and for all. But how far was Rachel really willing to go? Could I trust her enough to work with her, to fight back against everything John had built? As I stared at Rachel, the tension hanging heavy in the air, the doorbell rang. I froze. Who else could it be? Rachel glanced at me, her face paling. Margaret, don't open the door. I don't think you're ready for what's on the other side. But before I could respond, the door creaked open and a figure stepped into the room. Someone I hadn't expected, but someone I had been dreading. It was Devereux. Devereux's presence in the room felt like a bombshell, one I wasn't prepared for. I could feel the air grow thick and heavy as he stepped inside, his presence commanding attention as if he had all the answers, as if he were the one in control. His sharp suit gleamed under the dim light of the living room, and his cold eyes swept over both me and Rachel, taking in the scene with a sense of quiet arrogance. Margaret, he said, his voice smooth, measured. I see you're still fighting for what's yours. He glanced briefly at Rachel. And I see you're still here too. I wasn't sure where you stood in this little game. Rachel stiffened, but she didn't say a word. She stood silently beside me, her hands wringing the hem of her shirt as though trying to make herself smaller, as though trying to avoid the scrutiny in Devereux's eyes. What do you want, Devereux? I finally managed to say, my voice tight with a mix of fear and anger. You've already done enough. You've played your hand and now you want to finish me off. He didn't flinch. Instead, he took a step closer, lowering himself into the armchair across from us. The whole scene felt like a strange kind of show, one where the audience was watching, waiting for the next dramatic twist. I could feel the tension, the weight of everything that had happened in the room hanging over us like a cloud. Finish you off? Devereux chuckled, leaning back into the chair, his gaze fixed on me. Oh no, Margaret. I'm not here to finish you off. I'm here to offer you something. A deal. A chance for you to walk away from this whole mess. My heart skipped a beat. A deal? What kind of deal could he possibly offer me? I was done with their manipulation. I had been betrayed by everyone I thought I could trust. But still I had to be careful. This could be another trap. Another manipulation disguised as a lifeline. I don't want any deals from you, I said, standing taller, despite the unease that still gnawed at my gut. Not after everything you've done. Devereaux's lips curled into that familiar, almost pitying smile. You say that now, but think about it, Margaret. You've fought for so long, haven't you? You've played their game and now you're here. Stuck. I'm offering you an exit. A way out of this mess. A way to finally have something for yourself. I shook my head. What are you talking about? You think I'd accept anything from you? After all of this? Devereux sighed, his eyes glinting with a kind of dark amusement. I'm talking about the future, Margaret. Your future. You want to keep fighting for what's rightfully yours? Fine. But it won't be easy. You'll lose more than you ever imagined. But if you're smart, you'll take the deal. I'm not going to offer it again. I felt a chill run down my spine. Was this really happening? Was I really standing here, listening to the man who had orchestrated so much of my misery offer me a way out? Or was this just another lie, another move in his twisted game? Rachel looked between Devereux and me, her voice barely audible. Mom, maybe we should listen to him. If we don't, we might lose everything. I turned to her, shock and disbelief flooding my senses. What? Rachel, how can you say that? How could you even suggest we take his deal? After everything he's done to us. But there was no defiance in Rachel's eyes, only a deep, almost hopeless resignation. She seemed to be caught in the same web of fear and manipulation that I had once been in. Devereux smiled, knowing exactly what he was doing. He had her right where he wanted her. And now it seemed like he was closing in on me too. The air felt thick, suffocating. This wasn't just about the estate anymore. It was about power, control, and who would get to call the shots in the end. I'm giving you a choice, Margaret, Devereux said, his voice low and persuasive. You can keep fighting. You can tear everything down, expose every lie and betrayal. But you'll lose your family. You'll lose your name. You'll lose everything you've worked for. Or, you can take my deal. You can walk away with something at least. Your dignity. Your peace of mind. It was tempting. Too tempting. I felt a flicker of doubt, of fear. Was he right? Was the fight even worth it anymore? How much more could I lose before it was all too much? But I knew. Deep down I knew the answer. I couldn't walk away from this. Not after everything I'd been through. Not after everything they had stolen from me. I couldn't let them win. I wasn't going to let them dictate the ending of my story. No, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I'm not taking your deal, Devereux. I'm not walking away. I'm going to fight for everything. I'm going to take back what's mine. He laughed again, a low, mocking sound that made my blood boil. You're going to regret this, Margaret. You have no idea what you're up against. The longer you fight, the more you'll lose. But I didn't back down. I wouldn't. Just as I was about to turn away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, the screen glowing in the dim light of the room. It was a text from David, my lawyer. I opened it quickly, reading the message that made my heart stop. Margaret, I need you to get out of there. No. There's something you need to know. It's worse than we thought. My mind raced, my pulse pounding. What was worse than this? What had I missed? Was it too late? Had I already made a mistake? I looked up at Devereux, my hands shaking. What did you do, Marcus? I whispered. What are you hiding? The phone trembled in my hand as I stared at the text message from David. Margaret, I need you to get out of there. No. There's something you need to know. It's worse than we thought. I had no time to think. No time to question why David had sent the message now, why he hadn't been the one to call me. All I knew was that Devereux had already crossed the line. If there was something worse than what I was facing, I needed to know. I glanced at him, sitting there with his smirk as though he'd won. But deep inside I knew I hadn't lost yet. Not while I still had my mind and a sliver of hope left. "Excuse me," I said, my voice colder than I felt. "I need to make a call." Devereux didn't even flinch. "Of course, Margaret. Take your time. But just so you know, the clock is ticking." I stood up, my legs unsteady but my resolve solidifying with each passing second. I walked to the corner of the room, trying to distance myself from the suffocating air of his presence. I dialed David's number with quick, trembling fingers. "Margaret, don't say anything yet," David said immediately, his voice full of urgency. "Just listen. There's something you don't know. Marcus isn't who you think he is." I froze. His words hit me like a cold shower and my breath caught in my throat. Not who I think he is. I had always known Devereux to be ruthless, manipulative, calculating. What could possibly be worse than that? "David, what are you talking about?" My voice trembled despite my attempts to stay steady. "Listen," he continued, "the Devereux family. Marcus has ties to people who are far beyond just the legal world. I'm not talking about business partners or shady contracts. I'm talking about people in high places, people with connections, with power. They've been behind everything you've been fighting for. And they're not just playing for money. This is personal." I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes, trying to steady my pulse. "What do you mean, personal? What's going on, David?" "You've been used, Margaret." David's voice was low, almost a whisper. "Not just by Marcus. By someone else. Someone you never saw coming." My head spun. Who? Who, David? "I can't say too much right now, but I've been digging. I found something. Something that connects Marcus, Devereux, and—" His voice faltered, but I could hear him clearing his throat. "John." A chill ran through me. John. My husband. How could John be connected to any of this? He had been the one who had kept me in the dark for so many years. But now it seemed that everything I had known about him, everything had been a lie. Was he part of some dark conspiracy all along? Had he been the puppet master, not just playing me but everyone around him? "David, what do you mean by connected?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What could John possibly have to do with this? "I'll send you the files," David said. "But you need to leave the house. Devereux is not just going to let you walk away. You have to make sure you're safe. He'll come for you once he knows you have the truth." A sick feeling curled in my stomach as his words hit me. Devereux would come for me. It was no longer just a game. I was in deeper than I had ever imagined. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm done with him. I'm done with all of them." David paused. "Are you sure, Margaret? Because once you leave, there's no turning back. You'll be exposed and you'll have to fight harder than you ever have before." "I'm sure," I said, the words tasting like freedom. "I've been fighting for too long to let them control me. I'm walking away with the truth. That's all I need." David's voice softened. "Good. I'll send the files to your email. You need to see it before it's too late." I hung up and took a deep breath. My mind was reeling with everything I had just learned. The truth was out there, but it wasn't just a matter of winning the battle for the estate or exposing John's lies. The battle was much bigger than that. I walked back toward Devereux, my hands steady now, my resolve clear. I couldn't let him win. Not now. Not when everything I had been through was coming to light. I sat back down across from him, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. My heart pounded in my chest, but this time, it wasn't fear I was feeling. It was determination. You really think this is over, don't you? I said, staring at him, my voice steady but full of intent. You think you've won. You think that because you have the upper hand you've got everything in control. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his lips. It's not about winning, Margaret. It's about survival. And in this game, you lost the moment you decided to fight me. Survival. I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. It's about more than survival. It's about justice. It's about exposing everything you've done. Everything you've taken from me. Devereaux's eyes flickered with a brief flash of uncertainty, but he quickly masked it with that same arrogance I had come to hate. You'll never get the chance, Margaret. You've already played your hand. And now the cards are stacked against you. You're wrong, I said, leaning forward. I've been playing this game longer than you think. And now I'm done hiding. As the words left my mouth, I felt a chill race down my spine. The door behind me creaked open and my breath caught in my throat as I turned. Standing in the doorway was John's lawyer, Tom Hargrove, the one person who had always been loyal to John's interests. He had been quiet through all of this, staying in the background, but now he was stepping into the light. And in his hand he held a single document. I think you'll want to see this, Tom said, his voice eerily calm as he stepped further into the room. The room fell into an eerie silence as Tom stepped further into the room, the envelope in his hand a foreboding symbol of whatever was to come next. My heart pounded in my chest as he walked toward me, the weight of his presence heavier than ever. I could feel my hands trembling, the uncertainty clawing at me. But there was no turning back now. Whatever was in that document could either make or break everything I had fought for. I sat up straighter, my gaze fixed on him. What is it, Tom? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp with the edge of everything I had just learned. I wasn't going to let him intimidate me. Not now. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he set the envelope on the table in front of me, his eyes scanning the room as if making sure no one else was listening. There was something about his posture, the way he carried himself, that set my nerves on edge. It was like he knew something I didn't. Like he had been waiting for this moment just as I had. Finally he spoke, his voice smooth, yet carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. I've been working with John for over 20 years, Tom said, his gaze finally meeting mine. I've seen things you wouldn't believe. But what you're about to read, it changes everything. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. What are you talking about? Tom paused for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, he opened the envelope and slid the contents across the table toward me. I didn't need to see the document to know it was something important. I could feel it. The air thickened with the implications of his words. I picked it up, unfolding the letter with shaking hands, my eyes scanning the first few lines. The words were formal, businesslike, but as I read further, my breath caught. The document wasn't just about John's estate. It was about secrets. Secrets that stretched far beyond anything I had ever imagined. John left something for you, Margaret, Tom said quietly, his voice barely audible as I absorbed the words in front of me. Something you need to know if you want to understand what's really going on. The document outlined a trust agreement, but not just any trust. This trust was set up long before our marriage, long before I had even known the truth about John's financial dealings. And at the center of it all was Devereux. But this wasn't just about business. This was about control. This was about the power that John had wielded in ways I never even realized. The trust agreement didn't just grant me the rights to the estate. It granted me nothing. Nothing but a small sum, a pitiful amount compared to what John had promised me. And the rest? It all went to Rachel, Marcus, and more shockingly, Devereux. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I read the final lines, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't just money that they had taken from me. It was my dignity. It was everything. This is a setup, I whispered, staring at the page. This was a plan from the start. John never had any intention of letting me have anything. Tom didn't say anything for a moment, just watched me as I absorbed the betrayal. That's the truth, Margaret. John wasn't just keeping you in the dark, he was controlling you. All of this was designed to make sure you stayed exactly where he wanted you. He used you just like he used everyone else. And now that he's gone, Marcus and Devereux are stepping in to take what's left. I felt the room spin. My head was reeling, but something in me, some stubborn ember of strength, refused to let the shock take hold completely. You're telling me, I said, my voice barely audible, that all of this, the business, the house, the money, it was never mine? That John never intended for me to have anything? Tom nodded slowly. Yes. That's exactly what I'm telling you. He made sure that after his death, everything would go to Rachel and Marcus. They're the ones who inherit the legacy. You're just a footnote. A name on a piece of paper. And now Devereux is calling the shots. I stared at the document again, the words swimming in front of me. Felt like everything I had fought for, everything I thought I had, was slipping through my fingers. I wasn't just fighting for a piece of land for the estate. I was fighting for my dignity, my place in the world. I had given everything for this family and now I had nothing. I looked up at Tom, my eyes narrowed. So, what do you want from me, Tom? Why bring this to me now? Tom hesitated, then let out a slow breath. I'm telling you this because I want to help. I've always been loyal to John, but after everything I've seen, I can't keep doing this. You need to understand, Margaret, that the people who are controlling this situation are dangerous. They're not going to let you walk away from this. I took a deep breath, my mind already turning, already calculating my next move. I wasn't going to just let them take everything from me. No, not after everything I had been through. I would fight. I would take back what was mine. I'm not walking away from this, I said firmly, looking up at him. I'm going to take them down. All of them. Tom looked at me, a trace of something like admiration flickering in his eyes. You've got more fight in you than I gave you credit for, he said quietly. But you need to be careful. Devereux isn't going to just hand over what he's taken. And neither will Marcus. I know, I replied, my voice hardening. But they won't expect me to fight back. And that's where they'll make their mistake. I stood up from the table, determination flooding through me. I couldn't keep standing by, pretending everything was fine. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. This was about justice. As I turned to face the door, ready to make my next move, the sound of footsteps behind me froze me in place. I turned quickly, only to find Rachel standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes filled with anxiety. Mom, she said, her voice shaky, I know what you're planning. And I'm not sure it's the right move. I stared at her, my heart sinking. What do you mean? What are you talking about, Rachel? She stepped forward, her eyes darting nervously between me and Tom. There's more. There's something I didn't tell you before. Something I should have told you, but I was too scared. My pulse quickened as I watched her. What more could there possibly be? What had she kept from me? I need to tell you the truth, Rachel said, her voice barely a whisper. John didn't just plan everything for Marcus and Devereux. He made sure that if you ever found out, they'd have the final say. But there's something else in the will. Something you need to know before it's too late. The room had grown heavy with silence, the weight of Rachel's words hanging in the air like an unseen threat. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the tension rising with every passing second. What could she possibly be hiding now? How many more lies had been buried beneath the surface? My mind raced, but I forced myself to focus. I needed answers. No. I stood still, my eyes locked on Rachel, waiting for her to say more. She looked at the ground, her shoulders hunched like she was afraid of what might come next. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but laced with an unmistakable sense of urgency. "Mom, I've been keeping something from you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to tell you, but you have to know the truth. It's about John, and the will." My heart skipped a beat and I felt my breath catch in my throat. "The will?" I echoed, my voice cracking. "What about the will, Rachel?" She hesitated for a moment, as if weighing her next words carefully. Her hands fidgeted in her lap and I could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of what I might say, fear of what I might do once I learned the truth. "John," Rachel swallowed hard. "He didn't just leave everything to Marcus. He didn't just leave everything to Devereux and the business." She paused again, her voice trembling. "He left something for you. Something you need to see." I shook my head in disbelief. What do you mean, something for me?" "He made it clear that I was never part of his plans." Rachel looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. "I know. But there's a clause in the will that he never told you about. It's something that changes everything." I felt the room close in on me. My hands were shaking as I reached out for the folder she had brought with her. I had to see this for myself. I couldn't trust anything she was saying without seeing the proof. Rachel handed me the folder and my fingers trembled as I opened it. The first page was the familiar legal jargon of John's estate, but as I flipped through it, I saw a page that caught my eye, an addendum. It was short, only a few lines, but the words burned into my mind as I read them aloud. "To Margaret Devereux, I leave the sum of $500,000, with the condition that this amount will be available only if Margaret agrees to give up any claim to the business or the family estate. Should she choose to forego this offer, all assets will be inherited by Marcus Devereux and Rachel Devereux, as originally outlined in my will. Should Margaret contest this decision, she will forfeit all rights to any portion of the estate." I blinked, trying to process the meaning of it all. Was this some kind of cruel joke? $500,000? That was nothing compared to what John had promised me. It wasn't even a fraction of what I was owed. But the second part of the clause, the condition, made my blood run cold. It was clear now. John hadn't just betrayed me. He had set me up. He had made sure I couldn't claim anything. Not the estate, not the family business. And if I fought for it, I would lose everything. I would be left with nothing but my pride. I slammed the folder down on the table, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. This is it. This is what he left me. $500,000 and a condition to give up my rights to everything? To let Marcus and Rachel take it all. Rachel didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was too painful for both of us. I could see it in her eyes. She had been a part of this too. She had known what John was planning and she had gone along with it. She had stayed silent, playing her part in this family's deceit. But something in me shifted. I couldn't let this stand. I couldn't let them win. Not now. Not after everything I had been through. I wouldn't let John's last act of cruelty define me. I wouldn't let Marcus and Rachel take everything. I turned to Rachel, my voice steady now, though it was full of fire. "I don't care about the money, Rachel. I never did. But I'm not going to walk away from this. Not after everything I've lost." Rachel's face twisted with guilt, but she didn't speak. She just sat there watching me, her eyes filled with something. Maybe regret, maybe fear. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists. "I'm not done with you, Rachel. I'm not done with John. And I'm sure as hell not done with Marcus and Devereux." I walked to the door, feeling the weight of every decision I had made pressing down on me. I had a plan now. I knew what I had to do. Just as I was about to leave the room, the sound of a car pulling up outside caught my attention. I stopped in my tracks, my heart racing as I looked out the window. Who could it be? Who else was involved in this twisted game? The doorbell rang. I felt the tension coil inside me. No one else was supposed to come. I didn't want to face anyone else. But there was something in the air, a sense of inevitability that told me this moment was only the beginning. I turned back to Rachel, my voice steady but laced with concern. "Who's that, Rachel? Who's here?" Her face went pale. She stood up quickly, her voice barely a whisper. "It's Marcus. He knows you've seen the will. And he's come to finish what John started." The sound of the doorbell rang in my ears, louder than any thunderstorm could be. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and for a brief moment I hesitated. What was I really walking into? Marcus was at the door. Marcus, who had been nothing but a shadow lurking behind every decision John had made. And now it seemed he had come to tie up the loose ends. I turned back to Rachel, my heart pounding. Her face was pale, her lips pressed together in a thin line. She wasn't saying anything, just watching me with that same haunted look. I could tell she knew what was coming. The fear in her eyes spoke volumes, and yet there was no apology, no remorse for the part she'd played in all of this. "Rachel," I said, my voice low but sharp, "you need to tell me what's going on. What does Marcus want?" She swallowed hard, her hands trembling at her sides. "I don't know, Mom. I thought he'd left the house for good after everything, but now with the will and everything, he's going to make sure you don't get anything." I could feel my blood boiling. Marcus was ruthless, I knew that much. But for him to come after me now, after all these years, it felt like the last straw. He hadn't been content with what John had given him. No, he wanted it all. He wanted everything. And he would do anything to take it. I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten. I couldn't let him have everything. Not now, not after everything I had fought for. I stood up from my seat, my legs still shaky from everything that had happened, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. This wasn't just a fight for property or money. This was a fight for my dignity, for the life that had been taken from me. I wasn't going to let Marcus and his family destroy me. Not when I still had the strength to fight back. I made my way to the door, my fingers gripping the handle as I braced myself for whatever was about to come next. I couldn't let him intimidate me. I couldn't let anyone intimidate me anymore. I opened the door slowly, and there he was. Marcus. His eyes were cold, calculating, and his usual arrogance was all over his face. But there was something different about him today. A nervous energy maybe, or was it just desperation? He didn't look like the man who had controlled everything for so long. This time he looked like someone who had finally realized he was losing his grip. Well, he said, his voice low but full of smug confidence. "I see you've had some time to think things over. I assume you've seen the will? It's the only thing that matters now, Margaret." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at him, trying to keep my emotions in check. It wasn't easy, though. The anger, the betrayal, it was all still there, just beneath the surface, threatening to break free. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything?" I finally said, my voice steady despite the rage building in me. "You think you can just make the rules and leave me with nothing?" Marcus smirked. "That's exactly what I think, Margaret. John made sure of it. You've been fighting for a life that was never really yours. Now it's time to accept the truth." I felt my heart race, but I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. You don't get to decide what's mine. You don't get to decide who I am. Marcus stepped forward, his face hardening. "You don't understand, do you? John knew what you were. He knew you couldn't handle the truth. He knew you were weak. You always were. You're not cut out for this game, Margaret. You never were." His words stung, but I wasn't going to let him see how deeply they cut. Instead, I took a deep breath, trying to center myself, trying to steady the wild emotions that were threatening to consume me. "Maybe I'm not cut out for your game," I said slowly, my voice low but full of purpose. But I'm done playing by your rules. I'm done letting you and your family walk all over me. For a moment, Marcus didn't respond. He just stood there studying me, his eyes narrowing. Then finally he spoke again. You think you have a chance? He said, his voice dripping with mockery. You think you can just walk away with a win here? You're nothing, Margaret. You have no leverage. You have no power. You're just a woman who thinks she can fight the world and win. You're too old for this. You don't know what you're up against. The words hit like a slap across the face. But they didn't break me. They only fueled my resolve. I had been told I was too old, too weak, too insignificant for far too long. By John, by his family, and now by Marcus. But I wasn't the woman I used to be. I was stronger. I had fought too hard and I had lost too much to back down now. I don't need power, Marcus, I said quietly. I have something you'll never understand. I have something you can never take from me. Marcus tilted his head, clearly curious now. And what's that, Margaret? The truth. Just as I spoke those words, the sound of a car screeched to a halt outside the house. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. What was happening now? Who else was here? Had I underestimated Marcus' reach? Was he not working alone? I turned to the window and looked out, and there, in the driveway, was a black SUV. The door swung open and out stepped a man I hadn't expected to see. David. But this wasn't the same David who had been helping me. This man looked different. His posture was stiff, his face hard, and there was something unmistakably dangerous about his presence. I turned back to Marcus, my stomach dropping. What's going on, Marcus? Who's that? Marcus' lips curled into a smile. That, Margaret, is where things get interesting. Meet my real ally. The one who's going to make sure you don't have a chance in hell of walking away with anything. I felt the chill in the air as I stared at the man stepping out of the SUV, my heart racing faster than I could process what was happening. It wasn't just the fact that David was standing there, looking more like a stranger than someone I had trusted. It was the look in his eyes. Gone was the familiar warmth, the kindness that had once offered me reassurance during the darkest times of this battle. Now those eyes held something much darker. Something dangerous. I turned slowly to Marcus, who watched me with that cold, mocking smile of his. What is this, Marcus? I asked, the question barely escaping my lips, laced with a mixture of confusion and fury. What is he doing here? Marcus didn't answer immediately. He simply tilted his head slightly to the side, sizing me up, enjoying the discomfort in my face. Then, with a slow, deliberate smile, he answered, I think it's time you met the real people behind all of this, Margaret. The ones who've been pulling the strings from the start. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with anxiety. David had never been a part of the Devereux business dealings, at least not to my knowledge. He was my lawyer, the man who had helped me navigate the mess with the estate. But now it seemed like the walls were closing in on me from every direction. Had I been wrong to trust him? Had I misjudged him all along? David, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Why are you here? Why did you get involved in this? David took a step forward, his eyes never leaving mine. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret in his gaze, but it was gone so quickly that I couldn't be sure. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, he glanced over at Marcus, then back at me. You don't understand, Margaret, David finally said, his voice cold and detached, the warmth I once saw in him completely absent. I didn't want you to be caught in this, but you pushed too hard. You didn't listen when I tried to warn you. John had plans. Plans that went far beyond the estate, beyond the business. He wasn't just trying to protect his legacy, he was building an empire. One that neither you nor anyone else in this family could ever be a part of. I felt a wave of nausea sweep over me as I processed his words. You were working with John this whole time? You knew what he was doing? All of it. The anger in my voice bubbled up like a tidal wave, but I wasn't sure if I was mad at David for his betrayal, or at myself for being so blind to the truth. David nodded, his face impassive. Yes. And I had to keep it hidden. There was no other way. John didn't just trust me, he relied on me. But you were never part of the plan. I wasn't about to let you take what we had worked so hard to build. My blood ran cold. I had spent decades of my life building a home, a family, a business. And now David, someone I had trusted with everything, was telling me I was never meant to have any of it. I had been living a lie, playing a part in a game I didn't even know I was in. I had been used just like John had used me all those years. Why David? I whispered, my voice breaking with the weight of the betrayal. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Why did you let me fight this battle thinking I had a chance? David's expression softened for a split second as if he regretted everything. Because I didn't want you to know, he said quietly. I didn't want you to be hurt. But it's too late now. The damage is done. I stood there, my mind spinning as I absorbed his words. The truth was sinking in. David had been as much a part of this as Marcus and the rest of the Devereux family. I had been nothing but a pawn in their game. The sound of a car door slamming outside broke my reverie. I turned toward the window, my stomach sinking. Who else could possibly be involved in this? What other people were there, hidden in the shadows? A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked back at Marcus, who simply nodded toward the door, his face unreadable. Go ahead, Margaret, he said with that same infuriating calmness. Answer it. I think you'll want to see who's arrived. I walked to the door, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle. My breath was shallow as I opened it, expecting the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. There, standing in the doorway, was Rachel, but she was not alone. Standing beside her was a man I had never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a suit that screamed wealth. His face was hard, cold, and his eyes never blinked, locking onto mine with an unnerving intensity. He had the look of someone who wasn't just part of the game, he was the one who played it. Rachel's face was a mixture of fear and resignation as she stepped aside to let him in. Mom, this is Robert, she said softly. He's the reason things are about to get much worse for us. I took a step back, my mind reeling. Robert? Who was this man? Why was he here? Who are you? I demanded, my voice shaking but firm. What do you want from me? Robert didn't speak immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room with an unsettling calmness. He didn't look like someone who was here for a casual conversation. He looked like someone who had come to take control. I've been watching this family for years, Margaret. He finally spoke, his voice smooth, deep, and calculated. Everything you've been fighting for, everything you think you're entitled to, it was never meant to be yours. But don't worry, we'll make sure you walk away with something. Something small enough to make you think you've won. I couldn't believe my ears. Walk away with something? You're the one who's taken everything from me. All of you. John, Rachel, Marcus, and now you. My voice cracked, but I stood my ground. I'm done being part of this. I'm done playing in your game. Robert's lips curled into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. You don't get it, Margaret. This isn't about games. This is about power. And you lost the moment you decided to fight back. I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Rachel stepped forward, her voice quiet but desperate. Mom, please, you don't understand. Robert is. But before she could finish, Robert raised a hand, cutting her off. No need for explanations. We're beyond that now. I stared at him, feeling every ounce of fury I had ever felt rise to the surface. You think you can just take everything from me? You think I'm going to walk away without fighting for what's mine? Robert stepped closer, his eyes darkening with menace. You can try. But I promise you, Margaret, you'll lose. I stared at Robert, feeling my resolve harden like steel. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. But as I opened my mouth to tell him exactly what I planned to do, the sound of a door opening behind me caught my attention. I turned, my heart stopping. There in the doorway stood John's mother, and she wasn't alone. A man I recognized only too well was standing beside her. John's lawyer. "Margaret," she said coldly, her voice as sharp as ever, "I think it's time you heard the real truth." The air in the room thickened as John's mother stepped forward, her cold eyes never leaving mine. The man beside her, John's lawyer, didn't even look at me. He stood there like a statue waiting for some cue to make his move. I could feel my blood pressure rise with every passing second, but I kept my composure. Whatever was coming, I had to face it head-on. I stood my ground, meeting her gaze, and forced my voice to steady. "What is this, Margaret?" I asked, using her first name, though it didn't feel right. This woman, who had played a hand in so many of the betrayals I'd suffered, no longer felt like family. She was a stranger, and one I had no intention of welcoming back into my life. Her lips curled into a thin smile, a smile that wasn't kind but condescending, as if she knew something I didn't. "Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to help you understand what you've failed to see all these years." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I refused to show weakness. Not now. Not when everything was finally within my grasp. "What do you mean, help me?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the tension that had built up in the room. "What more could you possibly have to say after everything I've been through? What could you possibly tell me that would make any of this better?" She ignored my question, walking past me as if I didn't matter, like I wasn't even there. She sat down in the armchair across from me and folded her hands neatly in her lap, as if this were a casual chat over tea. "Sit down, Margaret. You might want to hear this. There's a lot you still don't know about John, about everything." I stood rooted to the spot, my fists clenched at my sides, but I didn't sit. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "If you think I'm just going to listen to your lies, you're wrong." Her eyes narrowed as she leaned forward slightly, her voice suddenly cold and sharp. "It's not a lie. You've been kept in the dark, and you've allowed it to happen. John didn't want you to know the truth. He didn't want you to know how much control he really had, how much control we really had." I couldn't breathe. What was she talking about? What was this about control? Control over what? I asked, my voice a whisper now, the words coming out before I could stop them. I couldn't understand. Everything had always seemed so normal, so safe. Even with the arguments, the distance, there had been some sense of normalcy, of routine. But now, it all felt like it was slipping away, like the foundation of my entire life was crumbling under my feet. She smiled again, but this time it was different. There was no warmth. It was almost predatory. "John was never just your husband. He was the one pulling the strings. He was always 5 steps ahead, and you, Margaret, were just the pawn in his game." I felt like I'd been struck in the chest. My vision blurred for a second, but I blinked it away. "You're lying," I spat, though my voice didn't sound as sure as I wanted it to. "John never played games with me. He was my husband." She shook her head slowly, almost pityingly. "That's what you don't understand, dear. John played everyone. He played you. He played me. He even played Marcus and Rachel. The truth is, he was involved in something far bigger than you ever realized." My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I took a step back, my mind racing. What was she talking about? Big business deals? I asked, my voice shaky. "Money? Stocks? Is that it? Is that what he was hiding?" Her lips twitched into a smile, but there was no humor in it. "No, Margaret. This is bigger than that. Much bigger. John was involved with people, powerful people. And you know what they wanted." I was barely able to speak. My mouth felt dry, my throat closing up. What did they want?" She leaned in, her voice now a low whisper. "They wanted everything. Not just the money. Not just the business. They wanted control over your family, Margaret. They wanted to control your life. And they succeeded. I could feel my world collapsing around me. My hands clenched at my sides as the truth, no, her version of the truth, settled heavily in my gut. She watched me carefully, reading the shock on my face, the disbelief. John knew he had to control you to keep everything in place. And that's why he made sure you'd never find out the full story. You were always meant to stay in the dark. And when he died, I knew you'd try to fight for what you thought was yours. But you didn't have the full picture. I shook my head in disbelief, the words choking in my throat. You're lying. You're trying to manipulate me again. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood and walked toward me, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she approached. I'm not lying, Margaret. You know it deep down. You just don't want to accept it. I took a step back. Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me? The lawyer, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. He placed a hand on the back of the chair next to me, his eyes fixed on mine. She's telling you the truth. Everything you've fought for, everything you've believed in. It was never really yours. It was always meant to go to Marcus. To Rachel. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My knees nearly buckled, but I held myself upright, clinging to the edge of the chair for support. Why? I gasped, my voice barely above a whisper. Why do all of you want to destroy me? What do you want from me? John's mother looked at me with something close to pity. Nothing personal, Margaret. It's just business. But you've become a problem. And the longer you fight, the more you stand to lose. I stood there, my mind reeling with the weight of the truth. The truth that had been hidden from me for so long. Everything I had known, everything I had believed about my family, about my life, was nothing but a lie. Just as I opened my mouth to demand more, the doorbell rang again. This time I knew it wasn't someone I had expected. My heart skipped a beat as I turned toward the sound. Someone else was here. I could feel the tension rise. Was this it? Was this the moment when everything would come crashing down? I walked toward the door slowly, my steps heavier than they should have been. The air was thick, and as I reached for the handle, I heard the voice from behind me again. You won't make it out of this, Margaret, John's mother called after me, her voice cold and final. You can't fight against everything that's been set in motion. I opened the door, my breath catching in my throat. Standing on the other side was a man I hadn't expected. A familiar face. David. But this time there was no warmth in his eyes. Just cold, calculated intent. I stood in the doorway, frozen, my breath catching in my throat as I stared at David. His face, once familiar, now felt foreign, almost like a mask he had worn all these years. A mask I had foolishly trusted. He had been my ally, my lawyer, the man I thought was helping me navigate through the mess John had left behind. But now, standing before me with an unreadable expression, I was no longer sure of anything. David, I whispered, struggling to keep my voice steady. What are you doing here? After everything, why are you involved in this? He didn't answer right away. He simply stood there, his dark eyes studying me like a puzzle, weighing me, deciding how to play his next move. His silence spoke volumes, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, squeezing the air out of my lungs. I looked over my shoulder at John's mother and lawyer, both of whom were watching me closely, waiting for the confrontation to unfold. This was the moment I had feared, the one where everything would either fall into place or shatter irreparably. David stepped forward, his shoes clicking against the floor, and I instinctively took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to keep my distance. I needed to make sure I wasn't cornered. You should have never gotten involved, Margaret, he said quietly, his voice cool, almost detached. You didn't understand what you were up against. You still don't. I shook my head, disbelief flooding my mind. You've been working with them all along, haven't you? I finally asked, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. You've been in on this lie since the beginning? He didn't deny it. Instead, he looked at me with a mixture of regret and resignation. I never wanted it to go this far, he admitted. I wanted to protect you. But in the end you forced my hand. You wanted to fight a battle you couldn't win. I stared at him, the weight of his words crashing down on me like a tidal wave. He had played me. He had used my trust and my vulnerability to further the very scheme that had already cost me everything. But why? I choked out, my voice barely above a whisper. Why would you betray me like this? I thought you cared. David's face tightened, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or something closer to regret. But it was too late for that. Too late for excuses. I did care, he said, his voice cracking slightly, but he quickly recovered, his tone hardening once more. But I was trapped too. Do you think I wanted to be part of this? Do you think I wanted to see you suffer? You're not the only one who's been played here, Margaret. John had me by the throat. He made sure I was involved. I didn't have a choice. Then you should have walked away, I snapped, my anger rising again. You should have walked away the moment you realized what was going on. Instead, you let me fight this alone, thinking I had some chance of winning. He looked at me, his eyes softening for a brief moment before the mask slipped back into place. I'm sorry, but it's too late now. You don't understand what's coming. You're not prepared for the storm that's about to hit. I felt my heart race. What do you mean? I demanded. What's going to happen? What's going to hit? Before David could answer, the room seemed to close in on me. The air grew thick, suffocating, and I felt the walls of my own life begin to collapse. I had trusted so many people, John, Rachel, even David, and now everything was falling apart. I had spent so much time fighting for what was rightfully mine, thinking that the truth would set me free. But maybe the truth was just another weapon used against me. Maybe I had been fighting the wrong battle all along. Then, just as I thought I couldn't take any more of this suffocating tension, the door behind me opened and in walked a familiar face, Rachel. She stood there in the doorway, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and guilt. I had been so caught up in David's betrayal, in the chaos of the moment, that I hadn't even realized she was there. Mom, please, Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't think it would. Her voice trailed off and I turned to face her. This wasn't just about David anymore. This was about my own flesh and blood. The person I had once seen as my ally, my daughter-in-law, someone I thought I could trust. Rachel, I said, my voice strained with frustration and heartbreak. How long have you known about this? How long have you known what John and Marcus were planning? Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes as she stepped forward, her hands shaking. I didn't want to be part of this, she said, her voice trembling. But I was too afraid to speak up. They threatened me, Mom. They threatened to ruin everything if I didn't go along with it. I thought I was protecting you by keeping quiet. I thought if I just stayed out of it, you'd be safe. I felt a cold rage bubble up inside me. Protect me? By staying silent, she had become complicit in everything. She had let me believe I was fighting for my family, fighting for something real, while all along she had been feeding me lies. Protect me, I repeated, my voice trembling with fury. By staying quiet, you protected them. Rachel's face crumpled, her tears falling freely now. I'm sorry, Mom. I was weak. But I want to help you now. I want to make this right. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of the betrayal almost too much to bear. What are you going to do? What can you do now? I asked, my voice hollow with exhaustion. She wiped her tears away, her hands shaking. I can't undo what's been done. But I can help you fight back. I can give you the evidence you need. The things I've seen, the things I know. I can't let them win. We can take them down together. I stared at her, unsure of what to say. She had betrayed me, yes, but she was still my family. And maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth now. As I opened my mouth to respond, the doorbell rang again, and this time I knew. I knew this wasn't over. Whoever was at that door had come to finalize things. This was the moment where everything would change. I turned to Rachel, my eyes hard. "Get ready," I whispered. "This isn't going to be easy." I walked toward the door, but as I reached for the handle, I heard a voice that froze me in place. "Margaret," David said, his voice low but full of warning, "you don't want to do this. It's already too late." By now, everything had come to a head. I had fought my way through betrayal after betrayal, each one a blow to my dignity, my life, and my identity. But in the end, I learned something that could never have been taken from me. It wasn't just about the money, the house, or even the estate. It was about reclaiming my life. Reclaiming my voice. The moment I walked away from John and his family, I had taken the first step toward freedom. But the real victory wasn't in the documents, the fight, or the law. It was in my decision to choose myself. To stop being the silent victim, to stop letting them dictate my worth. I had been broken, yes. But I was not defeated. The final confrontation with Marcus, the betrayal from David, and the truth that Rachel had kept from me had pushed me to my breaking point. But it also made me realize that I wasn't just fighting for what was mine. I was fighting for my own dignity, my right to exist on my terms. The people who had betrayed me, who had tried to take everything I had worked for, had underestimated me. And in the end, that was their mistake. As I stood there, facing the final blow from the people I once trusted, I didn't flinch. I had fought for so long, and I wasn't about to let them take my power away. I had learned the hard way that family wasn't always about blood. It was about loyalty, about respect. And if they couldn't give me that, then I didn't need them in my life. The final documents were signed. The business was divided. I took what was mine and I left everything behind. My past, my shame, and my pain. The scars would remain, but they would no longer define me. I had walked away without looking back, but now I knew it wasn't just about surviving the storm. It was about walking through it and coming out stronger on the other side. And with that, my journey came to an end. But it's not just my story. It's a reminder to all of us that we have the power to choose our path, no matter the obstacles we face. It's a reminder that no matter how broken we may feel, we have the strength to rebuild. But I want to hear from you. What do you think? Have you ever had to walk away from something, someone, or a situation that no longer served you? How did you find the courage to take that first step? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this one. You never know what's coming next. Thanks for being part of this journey with me. Stay strong and remember, sometimes walking away is the most powerful thing you can do.